Hello, I am Dr. Jim Pulcrano, Adjunct Professor of Entrepreneurship at IMD. Welcome to our Tech for Good series. Between the late 1990s and 2016, Silicon Valley, and tech in general, could do no harm. We praised, bought, and used all the new technology that the wizards of Silicon Valley dreamed up for us. But around 2016, we started to question this. Are the tech bros really doing what they're doing to save the world? Or is it just to create gazillions of dollars for themselves and their investors? Is everything that is shiny and new necessarily good for society? It is good for us to ask these questions and to be skeptical at times. But we have found many examples of tech startups that are doing what they're doing for the right reasons. Maybe they'll make money, but more importantly, there's a high probability that these tech for good entrepreneurs will leave the world a better place, thanks to their innovations. One of those is Alexander Klein, who recently left Roche to found AutismCare. Alex is an IMD EMBA alumnus, and I'm proud to have him with us today in the studio. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you, Jim.
To get us started, could you explain to us what is AutismCare and your 30-second elevator pitch, basically?
Yeah, sure, and thank you for inviting me, Jim. So before I pitch, really, I want to help people understand what really autism is about. So autism is a neurodevelopmental disorder that is a lifelong condition, and that typically is diagnosed in the early ages between 3 and 5 years with younger children when they come first time into kindergarten or school, where their social behaviors become basically evident that there might be something different. And from an autism perspective, parents, particularly in that early age range between 3 to 12 years, are the most critical resource, in fact, to help children build coping strategies and resilience that help them actually ultimately be successful in their lives. And that has been researched. So unfortunately, parents are faced with the situation when they receive the diagnosis for their children that they don't have access to care immediately. There's a waiting time of more than 1 year in Switzerland and in Germany, which delays access to care, and research has shown that that has fundamental impact on follow-up healthcare costs because they are lacking that early interventional support. Now, what is AutismCare? AutismCare is trying to really solve for that problem of no access to care by providing, through an AI companion application, direct personalized support for parents at the point of diagnosis. And what they get is basically an AI-powered engine that supports them in onboarding on what autism is. So it's a personalized self-learning platform with a curriculum similar to LinkedIn Learning, if you will. But also it helps basically then with an AI bot to coach and implement these learned strategies in their home setting and adapt towards their needs. And thirdly, they do have, if they like, on-demand virtual coaching with a human, because some people prefer to have a human, but that's a different price point at that point. So all of that is powered by an AI engine and knowledge database that supports that kind of solution and has a feedback loop. Now, this is really solving for the problem of bridging the access to care, but it is also convenient, immediately accessible, and what we aimed for is make it also affordable. That people that are from all different socioeconomic backgrounds can really afford that. And from a health insurance perspective, it also provides the right value.
I mean, I know it's really early stage for you. You're really getting started, but what business model do you envision? What is it you're thinking about here?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think the business per se is not maximizing profitability. I think it's a more social impact enterprise, and I think what we're looking at is to have a B2B2C model. What that really means is we need to work with leading institutions, medical institutions that are doing the autism research and the KOLs, but also become basically our content partners to develop evidence-based content that sits on the platform. At the same time, they would become our referral partners because once they provide the diagnosis to the children and therefore have access to the parents, really providing them with our solution so that parents have immediate access to this care, personalized care. That's the model, because we are not the content holders. We need to work with these leading institutions in order to provide that meaningful care and be trusted from the parent side and the community as a solution provider that is evidence-based.
Okay, I mean, to me, that makes sense. I labeled you a tech for good company. How do you believe that helps you with potential investors, customers, or even potential employees?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jim. I think what I experienced when we started that idea very early in April, and it's very close to my heart given that I am myself a caregiver and a father of a child that is on the spectrum. And I posted that idea on a hackathon at the Day One initiative that is sponsored by InnoSwiss back in April. I would have not imagined how many people would have been basically responding back to me and saying, Alex, I would like to work with you on this. Coming from very diverse backgrounds, have not necessarily anything to do with autism, but could relate and empathize with the problem. And that was, I think, for me, an eye-opener to see that how much you can, if you have a purpose, if you have a mission that is understandable for people, how much actually there is intrinsic motivation to support you on that mission. So that's I think from a team side. And in fact, we are still working as a team on a voluntary base to progress that idea from an idea into a concept and test that assumptions around that concept, which is great. I think towards the other part that you asked, investors, I think it's a great question. I believe the idea of going into a niche, for example, in autism, you need to first open up and help investors understand what's the potential. Everyone is interested in understanding the potential and what is the economics behind that. Whether you are an impact investor or whether you're a general investor, VC, I think that's a little bit where I would say we don't have yet nailed it very much, because we're still dependent on grants, which are coming from the public sector. But if you want to have a viable business model, we need to be able to come up with a business model that really speaks the language of an investor and sees that impact, not just maybe on a revenue side, but maybe also on the outcomes side in terms of clinical outcomes. So here's where we need to do still some work, and that's why I also like to connect with the community to better understand what are the questions that the investors would ask you in that early stage. What are they looking for? What do we need to prove in that early phase in order to, gauge the interest from their side? So that's on that side. And then I think from a customer's perspective, it's interesting. When we did our user research, reaching out to over 35 people and family members in Germany and Switzerland to understand their unmet needs with regards to autism care, I was surprised how much gratification came back by just going and listening to them and offering them basically an hour where they can help us understand what their problems are in their daily lives. And at the end of these conversations, because there's a lot of emotional distress where these families sometimes go through, and everyone was saying, like, thank you for doing this. Thank you for going into a field that is that I felt so much alone around. And thank you that you're picking this up and trying to do something. I always said I cannot promise that we come up with something, but what I'm promised to you is that we share back our learnings about what we've been hearing from you, but also what we can potentially do by offering that in combination with latest technology. And I think that's where technology comes in as a good enabler, because we are now in this domain of AI, and where we have the possibility to really feed all the kind of different dispersed knowledge into a knowledge database that helps actually to have a humanized bot and engagement with parents and supporting them in their day-to-day journey, because you won't be able to hire more psychologists, psychiatrists. We have limited human capital in this domain, and so this kind of capacity building in a system that is underserved is really the key here. And that's where technology, particularly artificial intelligence, can play a differentiating role.
It allows you to scale, basically,
It allows
because otherwise you could not do this.
It allows you to scale, and it allows you to be actually more precise in certain areas, because what we're also seeing from a therapist perspective is there is not one way on how to support parents. There are very different thought schools and different approaches towards this. And so it's exactly that kind of personalization that is critical, but it needs to be evidence-based. So you need to have that kind of solid foundation of knowledge that supports you in your day-to-day. And that's, I think, where you can make a difference by building that knowledge database and have an AI bot feeding from that and have that feedback loop that supports you.
I mean, I guess your reason for getting into this field is obvious because of your personal situation, but you went to a hackathon. And so I'm wondering, what was the trigger that says, I see a need, I'm going to go to a hackathon and see what happens? Where did that come from?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it was the right time, I would say. And the reason was, for me, at my role at Roche, I'm since over a decade working in digital health and been always at the convergence between technology, healthcare, and data to make and drive meaningful outcomes and impact for people's lives. And I felt that kind of expertise that I've built over a decade can be now put into a purpose that is from my own experience and from my own close to my heart. And given that Roche was going through a transformation, I had a bit of time actually, which is my most precious asset,
right.
To really put that into a hackathon and say, well, typically I take the role as an industry advisor, advisoring startups, but now I want to walk the talk and just say, okay, let me just post an idea myself and see what comes out of it. How much can I really drive this forward? And it's phenomenal to see how much you can get out of intrinsic motivation from people that all have different jobs, different priorities, but all of a sudden they come together for one unified purpose, and you can make something absolutely fascinating out of this that even wins prizes and convinces other people. And I think that's the starting point, right? You have that very small idea that all of a sudden creates followership, and that followership creates traction, and that hopefully converts into impact.
How do you define success, both personally and for AutismCare?
Yeah, I think for me personally, because it's a personal topic, the success would be to have something meaningful at hand for parents. Because I was looking for something, or we as parents were looking for something, and we sometimes still look for it. I think hearing all the stories from the parents and knowing how difficult it is, and how much stress they go through, hardship they sometimes go through, not just themselves, but with the kids, because there's so much caring for their children, and how little support they get and how much rejection they receive from the system, whether it's school system or even your health insurance and other ways, and there's very limited support to really understand and build empathy to your situation. I want to have something meaningful giving back to them that is convenient, accessible, and ultimately does a difference for their daily life. If I don't achieve that with AutismCare, I would stop the project, because then it's just another tool that has no meaning, and that's not what I want.
You've got a high sense of responsibility here, it seems. Do you feel that? Is that a good thing, or is that something that weighs you down?
I don't think it weighs me down. I think it just propels me to think at the highest standard that you would envision for something to work. I think in healthcare, you're not in consumer goods, right? You're not in something like an e-platform or something where you just go out, throw it out in the market and see how much traction it gets. And if it's not perfect, that's fine. You just iterate and so on and so on. It's good, it's a great approach. It's not a good approach in healthcare. Healthcare is all about your own health, your health for your children, and it's a very intimate topic, sensible topic, and you cannot mess up there. So trust is a really critical component, and being trustworthy, you need to earn that. And how do you earn that? Is by working closely with them, but also hearing what the true problems are and offering something that is meaningful. Otherwise, you're just another app on the market that doesn't add anything, and therefore you lose immediately trust. I think that's the standard that in my opinion, you should have in healthcare, and that we're envisioning, particularly when you talk about digital healthcare.
So I know, again, it's early stages. You just started in April, but what are some of the biggest challenges you've faced so far?
Yeah.
Because there will be more to come.
Yeah, I mean, challenges, there are a lot of challenges. I think first and foremost, the biggest challenge is getting from this voluntarily composed team into something where you have core capabilities that can drive a prototype, that can develop a prototype, because we have done the user research, which is absolutely amazing. We have done a conjoint analysis, so we know a little bit what the price points are, what are the key core features of a solution that would be most valuable from a user perspective. But I think where we're lacking is the capability on the medical side. So somebody who does clinical, not just clinical practice on ASD, on autism spectrum disorder, but also has that ambition to become a co-founder for some endeavor like this. And the other thing is the AI architecture. I mean, if you think about that, the whole solution is built around an AI engine where you need to build a knowledge database that is very particular, and then you have a customized, tailored large language model and a bot that basically responds based on that knowledge base to reduce the hallucination. So that technical architecture that should be also then scalable, I think is a critical capability that we're looking for. So that's one, basically finding the right capabilities on the medical side, on the technical side. The second thing is, when you are that early startup or early, let's say it's not even a startup, right? It's the early concept.
Let's call it a nascent startup.
Exactly, perfect name. Nascent startup. Of course, it's the funding. Because even though you want to do for low code, low cost prototype, if you're entering the space of having an AI solution, you need to work with experts together that don't do that free of charge, typically. So we have those experts that we would love to work with, but it requires a budget, a very low cost budget of 14, 15K just to get to that proof point, early proof point. And I think even this 15K that you need to get there becomes already a hassle in terms of accessing that money. And we were fortunate enough to be part of the Day One Health Nation, Digital Health Nation Accelerator Program, but we didn't make it into the second round, which would have actually given us access to the money for the prototyping. So asking about challenge, the challenge is being rejected early on. Rejected in terms of where you are, and then all of a sudden there's a no to say, well, you're not in this next round and therefore you don't have access to capital. So that means basically, well, find another way to access capital and still keep the project alive because you believe in that, but also because you have some early evidence from the user's perspective that this is something that there could be potential behind it. So I think that's the challenge in this early journey, is finding these early proof points and moving from one proof point to the next so that you build more evidence that supports your hypothesis, but have somebody that believes in that longer term journey and not just in the next step only. I think that's the key, right? Finding somebody with a vision that buys into your vision and is there and supports you. I think the label would be most likely an angel investor or public domain money that supports you on that.
Alex, I just want to say thank you for creating AutismCare. I mean, this is clearly something that the world needs. Whether you'll be successful or not, that's another question. But I'm really happy to see that you are a really good tech for good example. So thank you very much for doing what you're doing, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Jim, for having me.
And to our audience, I mean, I hope that, hearing this, okay, this is maybe one thing that doesn't necessarily affect you, but it probably affects other people. Are there other things out there where technology can make the world a better place? I hope in listening to Alex and his story about AutismCare gets you to think about how can tech be good for the world. Thank you very much for joining us here today.